Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Rausan Pereira. The coronavirus pandemic has overturned plans everywhere throughout the globe over the last few months. From occasions and excursions to promotions and income estimates, we've seen it all being affected. Companies around the world are thinking up and introducing new strategies to restart operations. But experts believe that the coronavirus pandemic could permanently upend the way we work, shop, and manage our businesses. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze how global businesses as we know it have probably changed for good. Joining me on the program today are Elisabeth Braw, Senior Research Fellow, Modern Deterrence, Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies, Praval Singh, Vice President Marketing, Zoho Corp, and Manu, Industry Expert. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Elisabeth, let me start the program with you first. Let's try and understand how the coronavirus pandemic has changed the way the world does business.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show, Frank. And I think what most of us have seen, the way in which most businesses are affected, that we can see in everyday life, is that they have to shut. And from shops to restaurants to factories, they have all shut. But actually, I think the more fundamental way in which business has changed is that the pandemic has reminded us that supply chains are extremely vulnerable. Now, they have been vulnerable for a long time. That's the nature of supply chains. They are vulnerable. But under ordinary circumstances, most of us don't pay attention to supply chains. They're just there. We get our goods every day. And now we have been reminded that actually there is a risk that we may not get our goods every day, and that companies may not get the components that they need to make the goods we depend on. And that will be, I think, that is a lasting problem, or the most profound problem relating or stemming from this crisis, because restaurants will reopen, but can companies operate knowing that actually even a relatively minor thing like a healthcare crisis may disrupt their supply chains altogether?
Okay, all right, Manu, let me bring you into the picture now. Is it safe to say that the pandemic has changed the way we work, the way we shop, for that matter, even manage our businesses for good, meaning nothing will be the same ever again?
Yes, it has completely changed the way people are looking at the business. And people really feel that the way digital and the automation things were working, now they will be very, very instrumental in enhancing the business volumes and the turnovers. So people have now actually realized that the automation or whatever the best digital tools they have, which they all were looking as the essential, or they were trying to look as an aggregator. Now, instead of them being as an aggregator, they are the one who will drive the business. So everyone now will be dependent on all the algorithms, on all the digital fundamentals and the basic technology tools, because that is changing the behavior. Because people feel that even sitting at distance, how can they take benefits of the opportunities? That opportunities could be anything. That could be shopping, that could be ordering food, that could be ordering groceries. The most important thing which will change will be around travel, because travel is something that can't be virtual. Like, we have not reached to that stage where I say that, oh, I'm sitting in my house, but I go virtually in the studio. So that's something which will take time. But on the other aspects, which is whether it is from the grocery, food, fashion, supplies, products, everything is getting changed, and technology is going to play the biggest role. So we really see that the way the technology is evolving, or the connected devices will involve, that is a big opportunity for that. But the behavior is changing because we are not in the habit of that. We all, whether it is India, whether it is Germany, whether it is US, we have a bit of habit to go onto the malls, walk across the streets, go to the cafe. So that's something which will change the normal behavior from an individual, and that will change, and that will also get affected with the cultural differences. That's what is going to bring the big change globally now.
Okay, all right. Praval, let me bring you to the picture now. So as far as change is concerned, I know you are a big proponent of working from home. I saw that on your profile as well. So work from home is definitely one aspect that has changed, and has changed by leaps and bounds over the last few weeks, and we've seen that. Do you believe the scale at which we have seen work from home take place over the last 30 days or so can last for the days to come, or going forward as well, the scale will be the same?
Thanks, Pereira. there are a few things to that, right? The first is the fundamental difference between calling it a digital transformation versus calling it business continuity, right? I mean, the way most companies went remote when this crisis occurred was to continue with business processes and then the functionality, right? This, I wouldn't call it a digital transformation in 30 days, right? Because that needs a lot more than just a virus to push you to do that. In terms of effect, there are a couple of factors that are that have played out. So one is the social culture angle of it, right, which thrives on trust, right? There are a lot of companies that are not used to trust as default or positive intent as default, right? So getting their workforce to work remotely, not be available all day on chat, and still trusting them that they're doing to their best potential is something that we will see how it pans out. The other side of it is the technology and the tools, that we talk about, be it a video conference like this, or a live chat tool, or collaboration software, mobile device management, all of that. So we're seeing a surge in the demand for such tools as well. So the technology side and the social culture side both will sort of play together, and we'll see how it pans out. We've already seen, the global supply chain being impacted, trust being lost between countries. We'll have to rebuild all of that. Businesses will have to do that again, and all of this will also lead to discovery of newer ways of doing business. Be it as a practice, or even from a perspective of where do you source your raw material from? Is it still going to be China? We don't know. Maybe Vietnam, right? Or maybe India. So all of these things are what I think are currently impacting how businesses operate and continue to think for the future.
I have a follow-up question for you on this issue of trust. Is it easier to deal with this issue of trust if goals are set and a time frame is set as well to achieve those goals?
In a typical supply chain oriented process, maybe it's a lot easier, but you can't always quantify time required to create something that involves a lot of creative work, right? I mean, not everything is time bound, and it wasn't time bound when people were working from the offices either, right? So I don't think we should be bringing that into the equation suddenly just because people are not under any surveillance. They should not be under any surveillance. Trust should be default, and that comes from the culture of the company. And I think we'll have to get to that if we want to see productivity levels continue to stay where they were.
You have a valid point there. That's why trust is called trust and not anything else. Taking the discussion forward, Elisabeth, so, companies in China has started opening up. There are factories that are opening up in Europe as well. I know Volkswagen opened up a huge factory in Germany as well last week. So, is there anything that we've learned from any of these new factories or these new companies that have opened up? Have they changed anything from when they were functional before the lockdowns?
Well, there is a lot more thought going into supply chains, and specifically what's called single source. So it's easy to do single source supply chains because it's cheap. But if you remember the 2011 Fukushima incident in Japan, that it wasn't a hostile attack of any kind. It was just a terrible natural disaster, which then triggered a meltdown in a nuclear power plant. But the problem was that many car companies used companies based in the Fukushima regions for crucial supplies in their automating supply chains. And these Japanese companies were fantastic. And why would you use any other company? So they didn't. But then when those companies were knocked out by that terrible combination of disasters, that meant that auto manufacturers all over the world, they were stuck. They could almost make their cars, but they were missing those vital components. And the current crisis we're in has demonstrated exactly that. But this time with regards to Chinese components, so not just so much automakers, but medical supplies. So both our drugs and our medical equipment depends in large part on components from China, and it's often single sourced. So I think what will happen now that factories and other workplaces go back, and manufacturing workplaces go back into operation, is that bosses will think a lot more about alternative supply chains. So maybe not duplicating their supply chains, but at least having some sort of backup plan for vital components. And yes, it will be more expensive, and it will be more expensive for the companies, and as a result for us consumers. But I think that's a conversation that needs to happen with the global middle class, where both companies and political decision makers have to be honest with the public that we have been able to buy goods. We, the global middle class, has been able to buy goods more cheaply than is really sustainable.
Absolutely. All right. So talking about cheap goods, talking about easily available goods, Manu said, e-commerce has provided us all that avenue, to get goods and products on demand and to get them cheap as well. So is that a platform that is going to expand going forward?
Definitely, e-commerce and digital as a platform will expand. And at the same point of time, whatever we call it as a local retail market or the local grocery shops, whether we talk about India as a market or we talk about developed countries in Europe and US, the digital platforms or the avenues where the shopkeeper can give benefit to their consumers will be leveraged to the last mile. Because suddenly, everything will not go on e-commerce. Otherwise, the whole retail industry, the whole supply chain will tank. Everything will get overstacked, because there was a worry with a company like FMCGs that people were stocking stuff. Was it impact of all this news around, or was it a regular buy? Because suddenly they are seeing a dip also. Like suddenly we have seen an upsurge in the liquor sales in certain markets or certain countries. So to your point, the digital and the e-commerce as a platform will now go deep root, will go to the local vicinity and the local area, which could be defined as a small territory, which could be like say 500 meters or within 5 kilometers, depending on the different markets. People will leverage e-commerce as a platform, because otherwise the whole world would have shifted on Amazon or eBay or the Flipkarts or Alibaba. But they also need local suppliers. And even they will leverage the local people to drop ship the product, because they have started their services like express services, which means that, okay, you place an order with a platform and we assure you a delivery within 2 hours, within 8 hours, or within 12 hours, depending on the nature of the commodity and the business we are talking about. So this whole equilibrium is going to get shift. The perspective is going to shift. The consumer behavior is going to change. And with all this change, that is where, and see, all this happened not only in one country, it like by chance, it happened globally. So what happened is like everywhere the business is stuck, and everyone is now thinking that how do they transform their business? How do they change or leverage with the leaderships, or do they need that much of employees, or do they need that much of workforce? Like even addressing to Vishal's point on trust, that is also going to be looked upon a country to country and a case to case basis. So that's very, very important, that how do we take it forward. But for sure, technology as a platform will be a strong bridging and I would say a biggest aggregator in the new style of working and the new style of businesses in the times to come.
All right, Praval, so this is where let's take this issue of technology forward now, considering how much of change we are seeing around the world really as far as the coronavirus is concerned. What role do you see technology playing going forward in making the lives of the people more comfortable and also ensuring that the social distancing norms are kept in place?
If you look at it, right, working remotely is going to be the new normal. That doesn't mean all these companies that were, enforcing people to work from their offices are going to be all remote. But what we would see, and I expect that to see more often now, is having distributed workforce, right? And including workforces that would be in not the metro cities, like in non-metro cities. We can expect companies to expand their presence into tier 2, tier 3 cities, thanks to the penetration of the internet and the broadband that we see, you can plug in a data card and be doing this call from pretty much anywhere in India right now. So we would see that set of technology being leveraged from an infrastructure perspective. And then comes the tools, the collaboration software, chatbots, all of these things we will see being used a lot more in terms of collaborating with people. And what that means is reduce costs for office spaces, which were limited to offline spaces. We'll see the definition of how office space expand to both offline and online. And what we'll also see is people, like I said, trusting each other in getting things done remotely, using mediums like video conferencing and others to communicate as and when needed. And like Sir said, it will also impact the travel, the global travel for business in the times to come. Also, technology as an enabler. We've already seen the power of smartphones, how all the way from a local Kirana store to Amazon, enabling shipments, enabling tracking of deliveries, enabling a purchase, one-click purchase is what Amazon calls it, right? So all of this together is sort of shaping what people are now calling the new normal. So I think these are the components of that.
Okay, all right. Talking about the new normal and talking about office spaces, Elisabeth, do you believe that office spaces are going to be redone as well? Because I think there are a few companies working on a few models where they are ensuring that cabins are 6x6 so that they can have social distancing norms in place. They're also the movement within office spaces are going to be clockwise so that there's going to be less human contact with each other. That way the chance of spreading infections too is lesser, and also the air filtration system, some people are working on that as well. So are we going to see a systemic change as far as the way offices are going to be redone as well?
Well, we probably will, if only for health reasons. But I must say, I always wondered about the wisdom of open plan offices with people sitting like little ducks in rows in complete silence. And if you talk, then you bother others. So you sit in complete silence. And I always wondered whether that was conducive to creative ideas. But if I can make one other point, Frank, it's that most of us don't really have the choice to work from home. And actually, we work in most people work in manual labor or other physical professions, and that includes shipping. And I think we should spare a thought for sailors who transport our goods and components going into goods around the clock. And I was just looking at figures here from Procter & Gamble, which is obviously one of the world's largest consumer product companies. They have 387 suppliers in China, and those suppliers ship 9,000 materials globally, and that affects around 17,600 products. So that's just a snapshot of how supply chains work and the incredible value that's placed on those supply chains working. And if I may make another point, it's that 80% of all global trade travels by sea, and those sailors that do that crucial work are often Indian. And I have often thought about what would happen if India no longer supplied all these sailors who transport our goods around the world. Now, the Philippines is another big source of sailors, but what if these countries decided actually it's not in our interest, we'll train people so that they can do something different, and why should we starve with the global trade? And without those sailors, the globalized economy wouldn't happen. So us here on this panel, I think, we all do valuable work, but those sailors do even more valuable work. And if they were to no longer be part of the picture, if there was some sort of disruption, we all would suffer greatly.
Absolutely. Since we're talking about this particular panel, so I'll have to bring communications into the picture. Manu, as far as communications are concerned, do you believe the way we communicate too has changed for the good? Because we've seen several multilateral forums, in fact, having some of their discussions and their meeting online like we are doing as well. Our industry too has changed tremendously. So the way we communicate too, has probably changed for good.
Yes, even something new which will also come up is, trust me, like a lot of global events have been called off. So there will be soon the time where you will start having virtual conferences. So which people used to talk about that, okay, we will have a virtual demo rooms, we will have the virtual attendees, we will have the reception, the catalogs. So the things will change. And that's where the behavior, that's where the consumption in every format is going to change. And communication and technology is going to be the biggest, I would say, the one which will bridge the gap right from the consumer behavior to the brands and to the companies, because everyone will cut down on their expenses, because it's all like a vicious cycle that's interrelated. But at the same point of time, business is not going to stop, and we all have to look at the new ways of doing business, reach out to our consumers, reach out to our prospective buyers, reach out to our current old customers, and even retain them. So the communication will still remain. Like, I'll just cite an example. There was a very good initiative done by one of the automobile manufacturer. They just rolled out a video and they said that your cars are being parked at your places for weeks. These are the basic hygiene that you should do to ensure that the car is functioning properly. Now, the point is, are they doing any sales? No, they are not doing. But they are still maintaining a touch with their consumers. The brands still have to be connected.
Praval, let me come across to you now. As far as new way of doing business is concerned, are there any best practices that you have come across over the last few days or weeks that you'd like to highlight and that we can probably take forward?
So I would say right now, a lot of businesses currently are focusing on survival versus growth. Even we at Zoho, our focus right now is to survive and to serve. So when I say that, it's first is to keep your customers and employees, ensure they're healthy, they're fit, they're taken care of, and then give it back to the society and do whatever we can across sectors like education, government, businesses, and all of that. What is also changing, in terms of communication during these times, is not just the use of tools like the video conferencing solutions we're talking about, but also the message, right? So there is a lot more empathy in how you engage with the prospect or a customer right now than we ever did, right? And there are serious efforts in this direction that companies are taking. All of us are getting a ton of emailers probably in our inboxes every other day. If you look at the whole approach of engaging with the customer, that has changed a lot. The press releases that we see from companies coming out carry a tone of empathy, right? Because it's a need of the hour, right? Everybody wants to survive first before, survival takes precedence over growth in kind of crisis like these. So that's important. What we're also seeing is priorities within the companies change, right? So you may be selling 5 different things, but the demand right now may be of a lot more for 2 of them versus the 5th one. So that calls for a lot of realignment in terms of your workforce, in terms of your strategy, in terms of your marketing budgets maybe going forward, right? And all of this is happening as we speak without a clear visibility into, like I said, what would the new normal be? It could be this, it could be something that we progressively get towards. But these are the changes that all of us are experiencing on a day-to-day basis from a technology standpoint, from a messaging standpoint, from a social culture standpoint.
Okay, all right. It's time now to get closing comments from all my guests with the best way forward. Manu, let me begin with you because your connectivity seems to be good at the moment. So let me start with you first and then proceed to the others. Go ahead, Manu.
Okay. So as he also mentioned, the change is the new normal, and the new normal is something which is constantly changing. So I would say that we all should stay strong. We all should stay positive and look at the new innovative means of leveraging our businesses, our customers, and our audience. That's the short and the crisp message I will leave for the audience.
Okay, all right. Elisabeth?
Yeah, so I think we shouldn't be worried about the current situation. Actually, it might be a useful wake-up call to think differently about how we get the goods that we depend on every single day of the year. And I'm talking now about the global middle class, which is really what's powering globalization. And it wouldn't be a bad thing for our countries and for the environment, which we shouldn't forget, if supply chains became more local or at least more regional. And it would be a good thing, I think, for the local and national and regional workforce, and it would be a good thing for the climate if we are going to have a chance to limit emissions to or limit the increase to 1.5 degrees centigrade. And so, in a sense, this coronavirus outbreak and the incredible disruption it has brought upon our economies may actually force us to do things we should have done anyway.
Okay, all right. And Praval, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
We spoke about the new normal. I feel the way it would pan out is we would see a lot of moving local, creating local, consuming local coming forward, happening there. Less of offshoring for things that we can. And this will, and it should, I would say, spread understanding of creating skills, the know-how and the formal knowledge that is required to produce, within the country for far and wide, across the population. And it will start with us as individuals, and then as a country, and then the governments as well. So it has to come from all of us. Like they say, constraints drive creativity. So all of us are under strong constraints right now for various reasons. But what I see is there's also an opportunity to think a lot of things local, and we're already seeing that happen across the country, right? And if at all, this would create an opportunity for all of us together to thrive in what we call the new normal.
All right, the worst will bring out the best in us is what the panelists are suggesting.
Absolutely.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for putting things into perspective. For us, that's it from me. See you again next time.